going to share something with you. That might put me in a very negative light, yeah.
Relationships are not my forte.
See if someone grabbed up my wife or something, completely different ballgame.
I'll walk away from it, and this has been like a therapy session.
Oscar Bevis, IFL TV, proudly sponsored by Everlast, joined via Zoom by Mark Neilson. Mark, we only spoke the other day. We might as well jump straight in. British boxing, never a dull day. I'll timestamp it just because more is going to come out. As far as we know now, Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. will not fight on Saturday. It's around 3, half 3. Mate, just never a dull moment.
What a week. You know, it started off with AJ Fury. What? No one's talking about that at all now, are they? I mean, I'm trying to get work done and I can't because I'm just watching, you know, IFL for updates and I'm just trying to see what's going on and keep my ear listening to the radio and everything. It's just mental. What a week. You know, and just crazy. Boxing's bonkers at times, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, never a dull moment. Not what we wanted in terms of drama this week. I know we kind of expected this week to perhaps start blowing up today with the press conference. Is it right? This is where I'll start because there is obviously a lot to cover. Is it right that Saturday night doesn't go ahead?
100%. People were asking me this over the last couple of days, and I don't want to be quite high and mighty, but for me, performance-enhancing drugs in sport are not acceptable. These boxers, I get it, they're athletes, and they want to fight at all costs, but there's a line. And for me, the line's been crossed. Now, listen, we can get into the technicalities of it, WADA, VADA, UCAD, but, you know, one of the boxers has had a result in his test for a prohibited substance on a list, prohibited by WADA, and it doesn't get into your system any other way. And you can wait for a second, a B sample, but of course, both those tests were given at the same time in the same environment in the same kind of, so it's very, very rare the second test is going to be any different for the first test. So in my view, the board did the right thing. Now, I'll say this, the board do have their critics, and I'll also say they don't get it right all of the time, but I think they got it right this week.
Yeah, I mean, we had that board statement yesterday saying it isn't in the interest of boxing. And then that brings into play the talk about the other boards and whatnot, and the other sanctioning bodies. In that amount of time, how viable do you think the options were for them to go and call on BIBA or the Luxembourg body, whatever they're called? How viable was that in a short space of time? Because I know they've been used before, but I don't think it's ever been on 48 hours notice.
Well, listen, money talks. And if you're a small boxing federation in some small European country, and you've got Eddie Hearn and Cal Sauerland's budget and all your DAZN money behind them, it's amazing what can happen. So if I suspect, because there was lots of meetings going on behind the scenes, and you know, I'm sure they were probably putting legal letters in front of Robert Smith, you know, threatening injunctions, 1 minute. But they're probably also talking to a couple of, I don't know, the Cyprus, Luxembourg, Maltese. You know, there's a number of them. And money can talk. All they need to do is fire them all in tomorrow. They've got all the data for check weights and that. And these smaller federations won't have the same standards as the British Boxing Board. If they wanted to, and if they made that decision that it was going to go, that they wanted it on, they could have got it on. But I got suspicion that that was one of their plan Bs. I mean, I think Carol Sauerland in an interview touched on it yesterday about looking at other commissions, that they probably felt the temperature of the community. And I saw some poll that 60% thought the fight shouldn't go ahead. So even though it may still done some big numbers, the damage it did to boxing and the credibility of everyone was starting to erode quite a lot. So I don't think, even though it could have happened, that actually by the time they got to today, they thought maybe this isn't such a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the online response afterwards probably says quite a lot. If we take it back to yesterday and the time the Daily Mail article come out, probably midday, what was your initial reaction at the time? Because obviously one article, there's still so much to be said by everyone involved. But the initial article, when you see that, what's your reaction?
Well, you know, firstly, you take it with a pinch of salt because it's the Daily Mail. So, you know, if it was from IFL, I'd take it if possible. But it was the Daily Mail. So I thought, really, can this be true? And you don't normally... and because the later the day's gone on, and then you start to see statements, and then you start to hear in the inside word, it's actually true. He has failed. There's this substance in his A sample. So I was shocked. Didn't believe it at first. Then, of course, as the days gone on, I thought they'll find a way. It's too big for them to pull. But then I changed my view as in whether they should or not. And I thought, actually, they shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the teams knew before us, but were you kind of surprised in the speed of everyone involved, sorry, to kind of clear up as quickly as they can? Look, this is going ahead. I don't know the exact time of how long they knew before us, but as soon as it come out, there was just like everyone on red alert saying, "No, it's going ahead, it's going ahead." Like, was you kind of surprised at how quick everyone was brushing
Well, I
off the
was
fact that it could be
surprised,
postponed?
yeah, well, I was surprised, but then you hear that apparently the random VADA test was taken 2 or 3 weeks ago, so it's in September, and I heard Eubank saying that they were aware of it, or was it? I'm not sure if it was. Got so many interviews now, you lose track. But the teams had spoken about it, and they'd seen medical. I think it was Carl Sauerland, and he was saying they were aware of the failed test. They'd taken medical advice to see that there was no advantage in Contractual. They were happy, so they'd aware of it for a couple of weeks. Now, if you're Carl Sauerland and Eddie Hearn, you got a plan B in place in case this all erupts on fight week, which it absolutely did. Now, it makes the question: how come the teams know about it and the board don't know about it until it comes out on the Daily Mail? That shouldn't be their source of drug test results for sure. So it's surprising how quick they reacted. But of course, they knew this was going to come up. They're going to have a plan B. You always hear about when they have these monster TV fights, they can have somebody as a first reserve just in case there's an injury the day before and it's too big an event to cancel. So it surprised me in one sense. It surprised me that the board weren't aware. And if they were aware, they would have said something before, knowing the board as I do.
I'll say put yourself in Carl Sauerland's shoes for a second. Obviously, look, he works for the fighter, Chris Eubank. So in his interview he done with us, he come out and said, it's going ahead no matter what anyone else says. But do you want the fight to proceed on Saturday, even if the fighter's happy, knowing what you know as a promoter, if you was in Carl Sauerland's shoes?
Absolutely not. I mean, I've been involved in boxing my whole life. I was at Neilson, Gerald McLennan. I was at that fight. So just imagine that something really bad happens to Eubank. How could we, in all good conscience, let that fight go ahead, knowing one of them has allegedly been using performance-enhancing drugs and has failed a drugs test or found a sample of it? How can you all in good conscience let that go ahead? If I was a promoter of that, and I understand the pressure because there's massive numbers involved, you can't in all good conscience let that go ahead. The boxers, to a certain extent, of course they're going to want to, they want it to go ahead. It's a huge payday for them. It's huge kudos for them. It's a massive event they've been involved in. The biggest probably earning for Eubank-Benn for sure. Not so sure about Eubank because he's been involved with like World Boxing Super Series and really big lucrative fights. But you've got to protect them themselves sometimes. And as a promoter, it doesn't give boxing a good name to see them justifying why the show should go on, even though there's been this negative, this test. So, I mean, to me, I'll be honest, Oscar, it makes me fucking embarrassed to be involved in boxing. And I don't really swear, but I'm watching this yesterday. I think this is bad. This is not a good look. You should have pulled this, rescheduled it. I mean, it was only a few weeks ago that the big boxer show with Clarissa Shields got cancelled because of, unfortunately, because of the Queen's death. That's been bumped for a few weeks, and that's gone quiet, and then they'll start again, and people forget about it. So this, if there was going to be they should have just delayed it. They should have pulled it and said, pending further information, we can't all good conscience, and they would have done all right. But this has damaged boxers' reputation. I mean, speaking to non-boxing people I know, the AJ Fury thing is just a bit of pantomime. That goes on in boxing. That's what makes it entertaining. The backwards and forwards, the flipping a table at a press conference, and that's great. That's good fun. This is serious. This is performance enhancing. This is Ben Johnson. This is not right. And the trouble is, these go into, it's not like a 100-meter race that somebody's going to get a fraction of a second. This is people's lives, and somebody's enhancing their performance to do more damage on the other person. That is not right. There's no place for it in boxing. I'm a bit embarrassed, as I said earlier, about how it leaves a bit of a stain on boxing because this makes it look really bad.
When does it get to the point where boxing actually suffers? Because we've had fighters fail tests before. Some have had a ban, come back. Some have avoided all ban. When does boxing actually suffer to the point where it falls out of the mainstream eye and people actually start to fall out of love with the sport? Because I'll be honest, this fight isn't going ahead on Saturday, but if it is to get rescheduled, the same buzz will be around the fight. So when does boxing actually suffer?
I don't know. I don't know if it will. It's too big a machine now. I mean, we know that boxing's not in the Olympics. I don't know. Is that confirmed? That's a major blow because that's a production line for future champions. So when does it get to suffer? I don't know if it will, just because of the marketing machine that's behind it. People have short memories, don't they? We've seen it with other sports where individuals have done something really bad and then they come back. We've seen it on TV, and it happens. Which is, I'm in boxing. Of course, I don't want it to suffer. But, we're quite proud in Britain. We look at what happens in America where you get, was it Gerald Miller? Massively, he's taken a concoction of various different illegal substances. And he can still fight because it's all different commissions. Over here, we're quite proud. We've got a really robust, because of the history that we've had. The British Boxing Board is the strictest one in the world. So we're part of that. So it's not good that the test can come in and somebody can ignore it and carry on anyway. So I think it will recover. I don't think it will be damaged permanently, but I'm not enjoying being involved in a sport that has been spoken about so negatively. And I'm getting people outside of the sport messaging me saying, this is terrible. This isn't going ahead, is it? Surely not.
Kind of into the nitty-gritty sort of stuff, contractually in fights, no matter what size. Obviously, this is mega on the scale, as you mentioned. But would a contract have clauses or like subsections where it lists what would happen if there's an adverse finding?
Yeah, I'd imagine of this magnitude. Certainly not on the domestic level. I mean, there aren't any titles at stake, but this is far bigger than just a domestic fight in a 2,000-seater, stadium, isn't it? So there's going to be quite robust. I mean, normal boxing rules suggest that once you've weighed in, then you get paid, regardless if the building burns down the very next day. So there's going to be some big compensation. I mean, Carl Sauerland, he's been around a while. He knows what he's doing. There's going to be some big compensation. I heard the word mentioned on an interview with him earlier as well. He'll be looking for that. This is a big blow for Eddie Hearn because he's Connor's man. He was trying to push it through yesterday. And, he will have one eye on the financial loss to him because this was a really big fight for him and his DAZN platform because it was going to be a massive pay-per-view, probably one of their biggest to date for sure. So it's a real blow.
And just one more from me, obviously easy with hindsight, but there will be a few people coming out of this who don't look great in the aftermath. As I said, hindsight, of course, but how do you think this should have been handled? Just from the off, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think Eddie's made a mistake by not pulling it straight away. Don't really know what more to say than that. I understand there's the undercard's going to carry on, and the show's supposed to be going on Saturday. I can't see it with all that financial outlay with just the undercard. But, so I'm not sure how we move forward from it. But it's not been handled great. People will learn some lessons from it. People will look like they were just chasing the money and not looking after the interest of the boxers. And for me, boxers' safety is paramount, isn't it?
I'm going to share something with you. That might put me in a very negative light, yeah.
Relationships are not my forte.
See if someone grabbed up my wife and saying completely different ballgame.
I'll walk away from it, and this has been like a therapy session.